My name is Dave Reski, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Raffi Yardemian, and I think I just pronounced your name wrong, didn't I?
No, I think it's right, David. Raffi Yardemian, just a little bit more of a in the middle there.
Raffi Yardemian, that is a good name, and I think one of the powerful things today is having a unique name. It helps people find you easily on search, so that's a really good thing.
Absolutely.
So Raffi is an outsourced fractional VP of sales, helping small to mid-sized companies grow. He has been a VP of sales at least 7 times by my count, and has deep experience to share. So Raffi, welcome to the show.
David, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
As you know, I like to start these conversations with a myth-buster question. And the myth we talked about is that the best product wins the sale. True or not true?
I don't believe the best product does win the sale. I think it's, that's one of the misconceptions out there, especially with smaller, medium-sized companies, where it's a product, technology, or a service that a founder and CEO comes up with. They might be a great technologist who came up with a great piece of software, for example, and presumes the product's functionality and features are all that the audience needs to see to be able to purchase and come on board. And I think it's a big misconception. Product functionality is a component of, but ideally the consumption of your product or your service is really going to be based on your positioning, your unique value proposition, and at the core of it is people still buy from people. I think it's the relationship that's created and the individual that's actually promoting and proposing the product. In many cases, it's people want to buy, they don't want to be sold, and there's a component of the purchasing process where, probably 60 or 70% of the way there, marketing efforts and documentation and the touch points along the way will get somebody to understand and appreciate your product. But as time progresses, when you get on that sales cycle, probably halfway through and you introduce a sales executive, it's identifying pain points and what the pain points are for your potential prospect, and then matching it up and seeing if your unique value proposition and the services that you provide or the components of your solution match up and remove and eliminate those barriers. That's why I think really digging in, doing a really good deep dive, unique value prop on what are the pain points. First, what are the jobs that your target audience is trying to accomplish? If you're selling into healthcare practices, what are the top 5 things that particular healthcare practice is trying to solve, or your target audience, your director of IT that's purchasing software for the healthcare industry, what are the top 5 things they're trying to accomplish? Then during the day, what are their main pain points? What are the things that slow them down from getting their job done? And then, what are the gain creators? What are some of the things that are gains that you're trying to get accomplished? And then if you take all of that together and you map out your product and say, what are the product features, functionality of what I've got that may take away some of these pains or challenges this individual has? And again, this is the area that's really challenging, is most either novice salespeople or in some cases business owners presume that if you throw as much of the feature functionality and the details of your product at the audience, they're going to consume it because my product's a little bit better. It's got X, Y, Z, and D. Some of those functionalities or those components just might not be relevant to your particular audience. And that's where I think really good open-ended consultative sales approach of matching up pain points with solutions is really how sales should be, and not just product-based.
So Raffi, you make it sound really simple, when you kind of lay it out that way as a systematic process. In my experience, and I think experience of a lot of small businesses, it's really hard to find a good salesperson. So do you think that that's true, or do you feel like it's usually, anybody, at least if they're committed to in their career and they're dedicated, who wants to be a salesperson, can learn the right techniques? Or is there a certain kind of person who's just better at it? Or is it really that, some people, try and they fail because they've been given the wrong process, the wrong instruction, the wrong focus with the company?
I think there's multiple components to it. You really do have to be someone that's a little bit more engaging and enjoy having discussions similar to this. identifying if somebody has a need or a solution in any component. So some people just naturally have the ability to be a little bit more comfortable in social settings and being able to talk to folks that are not that familiar with your product or service and asking some really good leading open-ended questions to identify what the engagement will be like, whether it be a sale or an introduction. There is an art and science in sales. Can it be taught? Yeah, there's components that can be taught. And it's like anything else, you have to continue to practice your craft and sharpen your saw and consistently be working on your craft to make sure that you're asking the proper questions, you're speaking no more than 35% of a conversation. And again, it's really a two-way dialogue that you want to get as much as you can from a sales component. But this leads me back to that whole myth again, which is historically, if you're a small business owner, let's say you're a $3-4 million software company, you've historically been hiring your salespeople or your first one or two, and you've had a mishire. It may not be the person you hired. It might be, or I'm sorry, it may be the person you hired based on the fact that you were looking at interviewing them through the lens of your product and your domain and your industry. And in some cases, and actually in many cases, domain experience means less in the success of a salesperson than making sure they've got that DNA and that capability of truly being a trusted advisor and being able to set up a solution and sell to the client. Many times I've gone into, and I think we probably both of us have walked into a car dealership, and you want a reliable car, you're buying something for your daughter to be able to go back and forth to school, and your 3 or 4 features that you really want. And that salesperson comes along and tells you about the mud flaps and special feature functionality, tells you everything under the sun, and really bores you to death, basically because they didn't understand what your real purchasing scenario was. You're really looking for 3 or 4 components. Tell me about this. This is what I'm looking for. Reliability is more important to me. And so, coming back to it, I think there's a lot of times where we hire salespeople because they potentially have industry experience and they go out there and talk about the feature functionality and the product itself may not be as successful. I prefer hiring somebody that's got that skill set and that acumen of sales, and you try and hire them through the sales lens, and then you can always train them, and it's proven to work on training them on your domain or your industry. That's worked much more in my experience than trying to find someone that worked and has 10 years experience in your industry.
So kind of the cliche of, hey, you're a good talker, you must be good at sales. That's not exactly true in your experience?
I don't think of it that way. I think whenever I've had a discussion or a little talk with other folks that are sales to non-sales people, for example, anybody that doesn't presume that they're a salesperson looks back at it, says, "Oh, I don't like that experience. That person's too pushy. I don't want a salesperson telling me what to do or making me do something I don't want to do." That's not sales. Having someone do something they don't want to do or is not exactly a sales component. That's what really novice, inexperienced salespeople do. It's a um, it's a comfortable discussion on a solution and a service. And if I can help solve something for you, and I do it in a very consultative approach, we're going down the path. Because again, people do want to purchase. Generally, an audience wants to make a purchase. They just don't want to be sold and potentially pushed into doing something that's not a perfect fit. So, you've got various different people. You've got a really outgoing, gregarious salespeople that walk into a room, and we all know who they are at cocktail parties and such. Sometimes we're trying to ignore and avoid some of those people. Then there are other people that are just very consultative, easy to deal with, and are listening, identifying where the opportunity is to be able to match up, again, a solution with where the pain points are and make it a win-win. And those are the successful people, and those are the ones that are going to get referrals on a regular basis, because at the end of that engagement, the person doesn't feel like they were sold something. They purchased something that generally helps them solve a problem that they've got.
So you're looking for good salespeople that can ask good questions, that can be consultative, that can become the trusted advisor, that can really engage people in a deeper way. And then you better to find those kinds of people and then train them on the product itself.
Absolutely. And then they have to be patient too. In the environment we're in right now, 12 and 13 touch points are needed for someone to understand who your brand is, what you're trying to sell, whether it be an eraser or a pencil, whatever it may be, whatever your solution is in front of you. the audience nowadays is so much more educated by the time, excuse me, by the time they engage with a salesperson that, whether it be your LinkedIn outreach or your messaging or your content, a salesperson has to be very um, multifaceted in how they're actually going to go ahead and get to their audience and get them to um, understand one, uncover the pain point, tell them a little bit about their solution. Instead of going straight to sales, there's an education element that's being done. And you need somebody very patient and the capability of coming at a potential opportunity or a target audience in a very strategic fashion in multiple steps along the way.
So we've been talking a lot about the qualities of a salesperson, but let's talk a little bit about the sales process itself.
Mhm.
And maybe they're directly related, but you spend a lot of time, I imagine, helping companies design a sales process. And how do you think about the sales process? And is it different from what you just described? Is it more complicated? Are there more steps than that? I mean, understanding how to ask questions about identifying the pain and then presenting the product in a way that solves that problem and being consultative. How do you kind of put together a process along those lines for a company?
Great question again, David. So, my experience, there's a lot of times where companies will put too many steps in a sales process. You get in and you say, all right, I want to help you. Let me see what your sales process is currently so I can help refine it, add on to it, augment it. And you come in, they've got 16 steps in their sales process. That's not a sales process. It's a procedure for how to get things done, but it's not exactly a fully baked sales process. In a perfect world, it's between probably 6 and 9 steps or so in a sales process, depending on the complexity of it. And every phase has goals and elements that you're trying to hit. So, talking about the questions and the open-ended questions and trying to move things along, a really good sales process has, before you move something from, say, discovery phase to, the proposal phase, for example, if those are the next 2 steps, what are the things you're trying to accomplish to make sure that that deal's still moving forward? What are the 4 or 5 things you want to make sure that are checked and identified? Talking about money, is the buyer engaged and galvanized? Certain components that you want to make sure are completed. So, in a discovery meeting, for example, legitimately it's for us to make sure we're discovering and identifying that the prospect is in our ideal customer profile. We can provide them the level of value. Can we do business? Are we a match for them? Are they a match for us? And really, a lot of people start selling in the discovery phase, and that's really not the purpose of that step in your sales process. Solidify it down, get to the point where your prospect realizes that you're not selling them anything at that point. You're making sure that there's a match between, again, your solution, their needs, and the way you do business and the way they want to consume this. And you don't want to misstep along the way. The main element that I see a lot of breakdowns in, whether it be a 6 or 8 step process, however you want to structure it, is there are 2 areas in the sales process that I think are flawed that I've seen. Majority of the time, a really good salespeople, the mistake they make is never setting a next step up. Now you have somebody on a discovery call and you've gone through and you get this feel that they're very interested, they're going to buy, I'm going to put it on my forecast, I'm updating my CRM, all of these great things that you're doing. Unfortunately, you forgot one really important element before you finished up the call, and it was, hey, I'll rally back up with you, Raffi. That sounds great. I'll get back to you next week. Oh, great, thanks. You hang up. Unfortunately, you didn't get the next step yourself. What you did is you let the client dictate the next step. And I think if you're not pushing for that next logical step, which is, I've got my schedule open here. Why don't we put something on the calendar? I'm sure you don't want to get inundated with multiple emails from me and trying to coordinate our times. Since we're both here, we've got a few minutes left. Let's go ahead and set up the next step. Sandler methodology that I do love from a training standpoint has a very nice component in there, which is the upfront contract. Always love that. What it really does is for any of your meetings, setting a clear definitive of, we've got this much time allocated. Does this still work for you? These are the things we want to accomplish in this meeting from the last conversation we had. And oh, by the way, if everything goes okay and we hit all of these items, the expectation is we're going to move this to the next step. You set up the meeting, you get the structure, and at the end, when you ask for the meeting being Friday afternoon, very clear and defined. That's one of the first areas that I see that's flawed in the sales process, is setting up the next step and the next component. The other thing is consistently sending out proposals without a true proposal review meeting of some sort. Um, you know, when you're in that buying process and you've got a prospect ready and engaged, many times it goes from discovery to proposal. And the majority of the time, I've seen salespeople that I coach create that proposal, send it out, and then wonder why the client went dark. Are they interested? Are they not interested? Is it pricing? And then you go through the consistent loop of maybes and maybes, and you spend endless amount of time and calories on trying to follow up. You send an email, every other day with touching base, following up, whatever element you want to use, and you don't get anywhere. The main element is you didn't actually review that proposal with the client, and you gave up something critical, that really allows that decision making and the consumption of it or the perception of it being in the client's hands. I prefer having some of my salespeople, and I put it in my sales process, which is there's proposal and then there's proposal review meeting. Never release that proposal unless you have some time on the calendar specifically allocated with the client to say, I want to make sure you fully understand and appreciate exactly what the proposal is. It's not just pricing. I'd like to get it out to you and walk you through the details. Can we do a review of that proposal together Friday at 2? 90% of the time, somebody will say, absolutely, Raffi, let's put it out there, because you're still holding something that's important to them, which is that actual proposal and details. And I see it probably 30 or 40% of the time, even on that proposal review meeting. The body language, you can get a chance to gauge, and then you clearly can help someone understand what that proposal means so they don't make any assumptions and make incorrect ideas based on either the pricing, what's included. And keep in mind, a lot of times the people that we're providing proposals to in the sales process may end up having to take it internally to somebody else in the company. Do they fully grasp on how to be able to take that and sell it internally to somebody else? And so I think that proposal review step that I've got in the sales process that I coach my clients on is a critical step along the way to make sure that you still continue that deal moving forward. And you don't get stuck in that client's gone dark on me. I don't know where it is in the process right now.
Yeah, powerful ideas. What strikes me from how you talk about it is that good salespeople have very structured ways of driving conversations. You could call it a sales process, but it's more new. It feels much more nuanced than that as you talk about it. It's all those next steps, those gates, those things that you're doing to make sure that the client's moving toward a decision in the right way, believing that they want to make a decision because the decision's in their best interest to solve the problem, rather than thinking about the salesperson, hey, you've got to be a closer in some ways. You're thinking about all these small decisions that you're kind of closing along, I use that word differently, but along the way for kind of small agreements that move the process forward. Am I reading that properly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's iterative steps along the way. And that's why you need someone that's got the patience and the strategy. Sales strategy, I think, is an extremely important element. I think this whole, are they a closer or not a closer? You can differentiate between a hunter and a farmer. Absolutely. Those are two different distinct DNAs and styles of people. But hey, I want to go ahead and hire a closer. Well, you know what? If somebody does everything right early in the process, does the right prospecting elements and all of the phases, they're going to close deals. At the end of the day, sometimes the closing is in the hands of your decision maker as well. You have to ask for the order. You got to move the deal along. But I tend to prescribe to the Mr. Customer, we're here moving together. You're making a purchase together. You're not selling them something, they're not buying something. We're leading towards an end result, which is having our solution work for you to be able to make sure that your company's operations are moving forward. And as long as you're always in that mindset that we're doing this together, it's a lockstep. Now, somebody has to lead. And that's where I think the salesperson that really is successful is going to do that. It's almost like a dance, right? The one that's leading is the one that sets the next step is the one leading. And you almost have to have a leader. And you know what? Clients sometimes need that. Many of them are used to the environment where they'll sit back and get a proposal and dictate things and potentially send it email back and forth. And if they're not the type of client that's going to be a perfect fit for you, that's where you eliminate that earlier on in the discovery phase. But if there's interest and there's an opportunity, we're trying to do this together. And our end result is the two of us are going to end up at this end result, which is, onboarding our solution or our software.
Yeah. So let's come back to that premise that we started with, which is the best product wins the sale. Isn't it better when you have the best product? Isn't it easier as a salesperson? Or is it just a different kind of a challenge? Because salespeople often, I mean, there's only one company in the market that by definition has the best product, right? Everybody else is selling and buying the second best or the fifth best product. So, what about that? How do you sell when you're the second, third, fourth, 10th best product in the marketplace?
Well, what is it that differentiates you from them? In some cases, it's the service and the support of the organization as well. I think that's the other really key item is if you're selling and in the discovery phase, if you mismatch yourself and you end up selling something to an audience that potentially is not going to, they don't value your services or your organization, et cetera, you're going to have a bigger problem later on because the customer satisfaction, the expectations, and all those good different components are going to come back and it's going to stop you from a very important step in your sales cycle, which is referrals and ongoing recommendations, both referrals and references from that client. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have the best product, you're probably going to have a better chance to, but your best product might also be priced at the highest level. Maybe somebody doesn't need the 18 additional features back to the car salesperson, the mud flaps and auto park and some of these other feature functionality that's in there that drives the price to a certain level. Maybe those are not even elements that you care about, David. So what I want to make sure is match you up with the best solution, best vehicle, whatever it may be, for the needs that you've got. So obviously you don't want a subpar product, right? You don't want something that the majority of your clients, your customer satisfaction levels are very low, your NPS scores are very low. That makes it very challenging for a salesperson to sell. But you take managed services, for example, IT services, there's multiple companies providing that solution. Many of them will say similar things, but there is a differentiator between them. Everybody has a slightly different, unique value proposition. There are some that sell locally that are a little more focused on a local type of client, face-to-face, truck rolls in the area. Others are, hey, we're much leaner and meaner. We can support clients all over the country. I can support a multi-location, international type of client. So solutions and products are going to have variations. Sure, you want the best product, but you want a product that's got a value proposition and a price point and some other elements that you can articulate correctly. But it's up to the salesperson then to be able to articulate that. Now you have to also, I had this with a client the other day, you firmly have to believe your solution is the best and it's something you can articulate to your client. Because if you don't believe in the solution yourself, very, very difficult for someone to be able to transparently communicate that to somebody else and be able to have them adopt that.
So you've got to define who your product is best for. Let's use your managed service provider example. In my experience, I've seen some companies like that are really focused on, maybe they're excellent at PC support. Some are focused on setting up, cybersecurity and focused on that. Some others are focused on servers and are really good for high growth startups that are using, Amazon Web Services or something like that. So there's different niches. And I think what you're saying is you've got to figure out who the ideal customer is for your set of unique capabilities for your product. Because if you're great at PC support, but the person you're selling to really wants an expert in cybersecurity, and that's not you sell them anyway, you're going to lose that client anyway, right? So you've got to kind of find out where maybe that's that discovery meeting. So as I kind of talk through that, how do you set up that discovery meeting and train salespeople on that discovery meeting to really get that match to work well?
That discovery meeting is critical because you really want to hear as much as you can from them. You've made it to a discovery meeting already, so there's a level of interest or intrigue from the person on the other end. And you want to be clear, I'm not 100% certain I can help you. What I'd like to do in the next 20 or 30 minutes here is identify where the areas are that you need some help. You're not just telling me you're not happy with your current IT service provider and you want to make a change. What I want to understand from you is, all right, well, who are your end customers? So you want service and support, and I'm not just here making sure that you don't hire a bunch of IT people in-house and you're outsourcing it to me. But I want to make sure that the security elements and all of those phases are all taken care of as well. So for example, if I'm an IT service provider that's SOC 2 compliant, I'm going to start getting all a little technical here. But there's a certain level of compliancy and cyber approvals that I've got. I'm SOC 2 compliant. I think that's a great feature, and I'm telling somebody why they should actually utilize it. There are some clients that are PR agencies and others that are like, this is not that important to me. They'll listen, be great. That sounds fantastic. I'll write it down. They're not going to pay a premium for that. Now, there are others that are selling into pharma and certain healthcare that the fact that you're SOC 2 compliant, you've gone through the additional steps along the way, you've got certifications, HIPAA, um, uh, Starbucks, whatever other compliancy elements that are available there. When those features are there and you understand what their end clients' needs are, when you understand what their pain points are and where their gaps along the way are, then you can start matching up and saying, hey, I've got something here unique that somebody doesn't have. And in some cases, I had a mentor early in my career that used to call it ruining. You have competition somewhere, and without actually knocking any competition down, you can comfortably put something there which is ruining the objection or creating an objection they'll have for somebody else. And if legitimately you uncover that they're selling into large pharma and compliancy is a critical aspect that they need to make sure when they get audited by their end providers, your IT service providers got all these. Slowly but surely, you say, from what I understand, you're selling into this industry, and these are the types of things that are regulatory requirements and such. Does your current provider have that? And very quickly, somebody might be like, they don't. That's the primary reason why we're talking to you, right? You start getting a little bit more into it, but these are the areas where you can differentiate, which is some of it could be product based, some of it could be what you've taken and what your heritage and your organization's um, goals and aspirations are, what your uniques might be, what the values of the organization are. A lot of companies will make decisions based on the values of the leadership team and the company because they want this to be a win-win relationship rather than a vendor consumer relationship.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Raffi, we're living in an environment where there's a massive amount of technology. Everybody's talking about Chat GPT. We build websites, we implement marketing automation systems. How do you see technology changing the sales process? Is it changing those basic interactions? Is the website doing more of the selling today? Is marketing automation really helping you do discovery and make that sale happen? How do you see the best sales teams leveraging technology, or is it just noise and people still buy from people and you got to have those conversations?
I still think people do buy from people, so you still have to have some of those conversations. But I 100% agree with you. I think the website, I won't even say just the website. I think digital and multiple touches and your brand being out there is doing a lot more of the selling than it was before. I had a small group I was speaking to, and somebody put their hand up and said, "Hey, I was a really good salesperson about 10 years ago. I've owned my own business now, and I see it. Is it harder to sell now? What's different about sales now? Is it, the 100 dials?" And I said, I won't say it's harder, it's different. Because sales and marketing used to be always known as kind of two parts of an organization, as close as we wanted them aligned. There were still two unique skill sets and other elements. Well, now they're so much more aligned, and if done correctly in a company, you talk about the top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, you name it. It's the funnel. It's the funnel that both groups are engaged in. As a matter of fact, the entire leadership team should be around. So, if it takes 60 or 70% of the sales are being done by automation or technology or other elements that are currently in there, they're probably going to take off even more. But again, to get somebody to go from interested and there's a gauge here to an actual sale, you still need that human intervention. I think really good salespeople that can help identify that there are things like security requirements and other elements that are important. So you help massage your solutions to the client's needs. But again, 60, 70% of the way there, especially the consumers now, they want to go out there and self-educate. They want to research on their own. And the better we are at using technology and making sure that we provide them the right content and the right information at the right time in the process is extremely important. And technology is going to continue to enhance that, but you still do need that. I don't think anybody's going to go in and buy $100,000 piece of software from an e-com platform. I don't think that we're going to get to that point where you go and self-serve and purchase something to that extent. And that's why there's multiple ways to be able to sell and multiple channels to sell.
Yeah, it strikes me that if potential customers are coming in more educated. They're learning about the industry, they're learning about the issues, they may be watching videos, they're reading white papers, they're reading guides, read the website. When they come to the salesperson may have less of a burden of education, and maybe that's where in the past they had to communicate the features and benefits, right? They had to do some of that education. But if the customer's coming in already a little educated or maybe a lot educated, then it strikes me that running the sales process and asking those questions and determining that fit is more critical than ever from the salesperson's standpoint, since that's the big piece of their value. Is that what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, and I think there's one more component to it is when we talk about research and education, realize that your competition is also very well educated on what you've got and your solutions. You need to be just as educated on other solutions and options that your client has. Because in that period of time in the sales process, when, yeah, they've learned enough about your product, but they want to see how you differentiate and what other options are available. That's where the salesperson's education, easier to do now that there's so much more information out there. But you need to know your competition and options, at the client's options as intimately as possible, because in that sales process, it is going to come up. And a really savvy client, will probably give you objections that are specific to, hey, you don't have SOC 2 compliancy. Do you have a good answer? Do you have a good solution? And in some cases, if it's the product just doesn't fit what the client needs, it's okay to walk away. But I think you really do need to understand in detail what their options are. And when objections start, that's kind of the sixth or seventh phase in the sales process, right? Handling objections and negotiation. If you don't get objections, you rarely do you have a sale. If someone's not telling you why they're not purchasing, then you haven't engaged them enough, or they were not going to purchase in the first place. You need to get to the point where if they ask you about pricing, or if they're looking at, can you give me a side-by-side comparison? I'm looking at a couple of various different scenarios. That's where I think a really good salesperson can handle the objection, identify it, answer it, and ask some questions to make sure that you've identified and solved that objection as best you can.
Yeah, really strong ideas. So in your experience, and you've trained, it sounds like dozens, maybe hundreds of salespeople, how long does it take for a competent salesperson who's maybe following not quite the right process or still stuck in an old model of selling, when you get involved with them, to learn a correct process and become more effective? Is it a 1 hour seminar? Oh my gosh, yes, now I can ask questions and I get it. Oh yeah, I can follow that. Oh, I can do those, upfront, what did you
Upfront
call
contract,
it?
yeah.
Upfront contract, right? I can do the upfront contract. I can ask for the follow-up meeting. Yeah. Do they learn it in half an hour, or is it really kind of weeks or months of kind of constant training, coaching, role playing before they can really internalize it?
The latter. You need to, as I mentioned before, you need to sharpen the saw on a regular basis. You need to work on your craft. And, I mentioned Sandler earlier with a great methodology. There's a lot of people that have attended Sandler sessions and done, full week, couple of weekends, or a couple of 2-day sessions, whatever it may be. The challenging thing with really even the best training in the world is salespeople come in, they get engaged, they're following it. It's only as good as the organization making sure that they're still utilizing those skills and methodologies, on a weekly sales meeting, role plays, one-on-one sessions. Those are some of the things that I focus on as well. So in my practice, I tell them I'm not here to just train 14 or 15 salespeople in a room and they're going to walk out and say I can walk on coal now and I'm great. They can go through some training and maybe it's a different solution that they get the training on. A lot of my role is to make sure I'm in that organization and the training and the development they've gone through becomes a natural habit. The muscle memory kicks in that every meeting has an upfront contract. Every meeting, if a deal is stuck, you utilize things like I want to close the file, Mr. Customer. It's okay if you don't want to move forward, but trying to get an answer, because no is the second best answer, of course. You prefer yes. Yes is the best. No is the second best. Maybe you're kind of in that regular, consistent theme of over and over and over again. So, I think that's the sales is a consistent theme, and the art and science of sales is something you always have to work on. And again, I don't think it's a half hour, 1 hour session. You just have to continue. And a salesperson has to go out there. You got to read books. You got to be able to see what else is out there. You got to be inquisitive. But by trial and error, you learn quite a bit as well.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly important. And there's been a provocative conversation about sales. So, Rafi, thank you for taking the time. I've learned a lot, and it's challenged me in a couple areas in our own business. So I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine, David. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I enjoy seeing these regularly, and thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. And if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about your services and how you can help revolutionize their sales organization, how would they do that?
Yeah, Raffi Yardemian. My company name is Boston Sales Solutions. Best email is my first name, Raffi, Raffi, very unique name as you mentioned, at sales, SALES, X, acceleration, CELERATION.com. And I'm at 617-233-4841. But please look up my website and feel free to reach out. You can probably see some great content that I've got on LinkedIn as well. That's a perfect place to find me as well.
Great. Rafi, thanks for taking the time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, David. Have a great day as well.